David, I think I'm in the minority here, but I didn't watch South Park growing up. I don't know why, just never grabbed me. Maybe I didn't get the humour. Um, but a lot of people did. And it is, one of those shows, isn't it, that sort of spans generations. There are teenagers now who are watching it in the same way that their parents did, a couple of decades ago.
Yeah, how else would I know how to offend everyone equally if I hadn't watched South Park? My kids certainly watch it, but they're more your generation. So I'm kind of surprised you're not a fan, Martha.
Yeah, I know. Just never grabbed me. But it's also interesting the way that it used to offend the left and now it's offending the right in America. And Donald Trump claims that he doesn't watch South Park, but I've got a sneaky little suspicion that he does. And we're going to get more into that later. I'm Martha Kellner.
And I'm David Blevins.
It's Friday, the 8th of August, day 200 of Donald Trump's second term. We've now officially doubled the stated length of this podcast, but we keep being given the gift of news by the president.
The Trump tsunami. On today's episode, Martha, Trump and pop culture, and how the president manages to grab the headlines on everything, from South Park to Sydney Sweeney's jeans.
Yeah, we'll also have the latest update on immigration raids in California, the project known as Trojan Horse. But first, President Trump and Vladimir Putin could meet in person. So is this the beginning of the end of the war, or is it just another false dawn? So, David, a big development over the past few days, a possible, and emphasis on possible here, possible meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And this all came about kind of unexpectedly, didn't it?
Yes, things shifted in a matter of hours. The Kremlin says Presidents Trump and Putin will meet in the coming days. They're a little more tempered in their expectation at the White House. On Thursday, President Trump said there was a good prospect of that meeting happening soon. But sources at the White House say the meeting will only take place if President Putin also agrees to meet with President Zelenskyy. That is a huge question, Martha. It would be the first face-to-face talks between a US president and their Russian counterpart since 2021, before Russia invaded Ukraine, the largest invasion of a European nation since the Second World War. So there's a lot at stake here.
Yeah, that 2021 meeting was when Putin sat down with President Biden, then President Biden, in Geneva. Obviously, though, the world was a very different place then. This was before his invasion, as you say, of a sovereign state. He is also a pariah on the world stage in a way that he wasn't back then. He has been completely ostracised. So this would be a big win for Putin, certainly, if he was able to secure this bilat with President Trump. And talk of this meeting came immediately after Trump's envoy, his peace envoy, so-called, Steve Witkoff, spent 3 hours with Putin in Moscow this week. It's curious, isn't it, that the White House and the Kremlin would start talking about this meeting publicly without any detail on where the meeting will take place, when it will take place, or it seems any solid developments in terms of a path to peace.
It's difficult to gauge the chances of a deal without knowing what Donald Trump meant when he talked about Steve Witkoff having made great progress, Martha, in that meeting with President Putin. Is Russia more inclined to call a ceasefire, as President Zelenskyy is now claiming? Is Putin, for example, ready to sit down with President Zelenskyy? Or is Trump prepared in some way to concede? US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says they now have a better idea of what Russia would ask in return for a ceasefire. So the US has a better idea in terms of the administration, but we don't. So we're still in this wait and see place.
We wanted to find out a little bit more, didn't we, about what the Russians are making of all this. So we enlisted some help in the shape of Sky News' Moscow correspondent, Ivor Bennett. He sent us this short voice note a little earlier.
A bit of a blinder. One Russian newspaper, for example, state-run obviously, declared simply in its headline, Putin won. So very triumphant. It claims the Russian president has bought time by agreeing to its summit because it seems to have made Friday's deadline that Trump had set null and void. One of Russia's influential war bloggers, Yuri Podolyaka, he's written on Telegram that Putin had played a masterful diplomatic game, spinning Trump in a carousel of negotiations. But what I think were potentially the most telling comments today came from Kremlin official Kirill Dmitriev. He is Vladimir Putin's investment envoy and the man you always see chaperoning Steve Witkoff around when he comes to Moscow. And he started talking today about all the potential for economic cooperation between Russia and the US in lieu of this summit. Things like projects in the Arctic, rare earth deals, which suggests to me that Russia sees this summit much more as a way to advance bilateral relations with the US rather than a pivotal moment for peace. Going on the basis of what's happened in the last 6 months and the fact that Russia has still not shown any sign that it's willing to compromise, I'd say that is unlikely.
We've also just had a statement through, David, quite literally as we're recording this podcast, from the White House press sec, Caroline Levitt. She says the White House is working through the details of these potential meetings and details will be provided at the appropriate time. Interesting that she says meetings plural here. So will there be other people present? Will this also include Vladimir Zelenskyy, possibly a meeting with both presidents at separate times? I think at the moment it is still more likely that this meeting doesn't go ahead than that it does. But, you know, if it does happen, it presents way more of an opportunity, I think, for Putin than it does for Trump, because it gives him the chance to be back in the fold in some sense. You know, that visibility of meeting with a US president still has a huge cachet. And this would be the first time that he's held direct talks with a NATO leader since that invasion of Ukraine. It's also a chance for him to secure a peace deal with Trump on his terms, so with Russia's, not Ukraine's, geopolitical strategic aims. As I say, why Trump has agreed to it is less clear. Perhaps Putin has signalled that he is willing to negotiate on some of the previous demands he'd made in order to agree for a cease deal. He previously said he would only go for it if Russia kept all the land it's occupied during the invasion, but that it doesn't control. So, you know, perhaps Putin has given the impression that he's willing to shift somewhat, and perhaps the domestic pressure about the huge cost of this war to Russia, the massive, colossal amount of lives lost on the front line, has meant that he is more willing to negotiate than he previously was, you know, 2-3 months ago.
And it's been clear for some time that Trump just wants a deal, something to end the death and destruction caused by what he frequently describes as Biden's war. But of course, an end to that war is not the only thing that Trump has in sight. It's not his only goal. There is the Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah. Every time he speaks now, he's claiming that he has ended 5 wars since assuming office 200 days ago, including the 12-day war between Israel and Iran. He appears to have a kind of obsession with winning the Nobel Peace Prize, and may not actually care what any deal he would do with Russia means for Ukraine. And that is why Zelenskyy perhaps is very nervous. And why wouldn't he be after that infamous showdown in the Oval Office a few months ago?
I was saying at the top of the show, David, I never really watched South Park. I do, however, remember being haunted by that Gingers Do Have Souls sketch. Do you remember that?
I do.
I remember being mercilessly teased about it. It came out when I was in the depths of high school. And it's one of those shows where you hear about it even if you aren't watching it. And that's definitely true at the moment. It is the most talked about TV show on air right now. And there's one very clear reason for that, and it's Donald Trump. So just to give a bit of background for anyone who doesn't know, the South Park creators, who are richer than God at this point, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, they said in the past that they couldn't satirize Trump anymore. They said they were done with him in their sketches. What more can we say about him, etc., etc. In the meantime, they've signed this $1.5 multi-billion-dollar deal with Paramount to continue making shows. This is the same Paramount, bear with me, that just settled a $16 million lawsuit with Trump. That was over an episode of 60 Minutes, an interview they did with Kamala Harris, which Donald Trump sued them for. He said it was unfairly edited. Some say that Paramount capitulated to him because they wanted to get a multi-billion-dollar deal over the line, separate deal, a buyout by Skydance, a company for Paramount, which had to be approved by a US government department, which is run by one of Trump's underlings. So lots of people think it's curious how quickly they rolled over in this lawsuit. It also coincided with the cancellation of the Stephen Colbert show. Colbert is one of the most popular late night show hosts, also one of the sharpest critics of Donald Trump. So Paramount say that this cancellation of Colbert is for financial reasons. Others suspect it may have been for political reasons. Anyway, that's the background context to all this. And so when South Park goes back to air a couple of weeks ago, everyone expected them to kind of lay off Trump, given that all this was happening in the background. They very much did not lay off Donald Trump, did they?
They certainly did not. The first episode they entitled Sermon on the Mount, a biblical reference, of course, so you can imagine how that went down in parts of the United States. But it turned out to be the most watched episode since 1999, nearly 6 million viewers. Nearly as big an audience as we have on this podcast, Martha.
Almost.
That episode parodies Trump with brutal imagery. He is depicted in bed with Satan. He is mocked for being a not terribly well endowed, shall we say. And an AI-generated deepfake shows a naked Donald Trump wandering through the desert. Trump claimed he'd never watched an episode of South Park, but the White House fired back saying the show, and I quote, hasn't been relevant for 20 years and is hanging by a thread with uninspired ideas in a desperate attempt for attention. Now, if that's the case, why engage at all?
That's exactly it. If it's so irrelevant, then why bother issuing a statement? I will also say Trump doesn't have to watch the entire episode of South Park because some of these clips have gone viral online. If they've got 6 million views to the actual show, they've got many, many more times that watching these clips back. It is undoubted that this stuff is what really gets under his skin when he comes across as being humiliated in pop culture moments.
And you talk about stuff getting under his skin and the fact that he engages with all of this stuff. He's also been talking about another unlikely subject, Sydney Sweeney's jeans.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to be under a rock to not know the furore around Sydney Sweeney's jeans. This is an advert that she did for American Eagle, which is a denim company over here. Provocative advert where the voiceover talks about her having great jeans.
Was a registered Republican. Any thoughts on that?
That who was?
Sydney Sweeney. She's like a very hot actress right now.
She's a registered Republican?
Yes.
Oh, now I love her ad. Is that right? Is Sydney Sweeney? You'd be surprised at how many people are Republicans. That's what I wouldn't have known, but I'm glad you told me that. If Sydney Sweeney is a registered Republican, I think her ad is fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay?
President, actress Sydney Sweeney came out this weekend that she was a registered Republican. Any thoughts on that?
That who was?
Sydney Sweeney. She's like a very hot actress right now.
She's a registered Republican?
Yes.
Oh, now I love her ad. Is that right? Is Sydney Sweeney? You'd be surprised at how many people are Republicans. That's what I wouldn't have known, but I'm glad you told me that. If Sydney Sweeney is a registered Republican, I think her ad is fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay?
President, actress Sydney Sweeney came out this weekend that she was a registered Republican. Any thoughts on that?
That who was?
Sydney Sweeney. She's like a very hot actress right now.
She's a registered Republican?
Yes.
Oh, now I love her ad. Is that right? Is Sydney Sweeney? You'd be surprised at how many people are Republicans. That's what I wouldn't have known, but I'm glad you told me that. If Sydney Sweeney is a registered Republican, I think her ad is fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
I'm sure that the advertising guys had in mind that 1980s advert with Brooke Shields, where she talks about nothing getting between her and her Calvins. But this has now mushroomed online into a full-blown culture war about eugenics, talk about the Nazis, which is all a bit of a leap, in my opinion. But it is something that people are talking about. You know, I was at dinner with friends earlier this week. They're not talking, let me tell you, about the redrawing of the congressional map in Texas, but they are talking about Sydney Sweeney's genes. And by extension, they're also talking about President Trump because he has managed to insert himself into this conversation.
I'm not here to tell you to buy American Eagle jeans. And I definitely won't say that they're the most comfortable jeans I've ever worn. Or that they make your butt look amazing. Why would I need to do that? But if you said that you want to buy the jeans, I'm not going to stop you. But just so we're clear, this is not me telling you to buy American Eagle jeans.
Sydney Sweeney, Hasbro Jeans.
You see what I did there, right?
And I was watching Fox News as well earlier this week, and there's a talk show on there hosted by Lara Trump, who is Donald Trump's daughter-in-law. You know, she says the Democrats are so obsessed with this advert that they're not focusing on the things that make your lives better. And that's how Donald Trump wins on these issues. You know, he says this is the woke left. They're focusing on Sydney Sweeney's genes. They're focusing on transgender issues, and they're not thinking about your bills, about your mortgage, you know, about your kids' education.
People sometimes ask, Martha, how does Trump get this pop culture more than any other president before him? I think it's less a case of him getting it and more a case of him not being able to resist it, because he comes from an entertainment background. Before he was president, we know he was famous as the presenter of the American version of The Apprentice. So he comes to the White House with this combination of entertainment and politics that we've never seen before. And you're quite right. People find that relatable. He speaks the language of so many Americans. They think he therefore understands them. And it gives him sound bites. It puts him on the airwaves all the time. We know how much he loves speaking to the media. Every announcement about everything, even cabinet meetings, turn into 90-minute press conferences because he loves an audience.
He appeals to America's heartland by engaging on things that people are interested in, you know, that people are talking about. And he makes sure that he is a feature, a character in these stories, which really he has no right to be involved in. You know, what does Donald Trump have to do with Sydney Sweeney's denim adverts?
In the polarised world that we find ourselves in right now, you and I know that whenever we report, we're going to get pushback online one way or the other. And one of the things you learn is to not push back, because when you check where the criticism is coming from, it's often from people with very few followers online. So when you engage, you are actually giving them the oxygen of publicity. But Donald Trump engages with everyone because he just loves the attention.
He loves the publicity. Just before we go, David, we've obviously covered extensively on this podcast the immigration raids which are happening around the country, but particularly in California. In California, they have slowed down in recent weeks, mainly because there's this injunction, a court injunction at place, which has stopped immigration and customs enforcement agents, these ICE agents, conducting the raids indiscriminately at random. They're no longer allowed to do that. But there are raids still taking place. There was one earlier this week in MacArthur Park, which is an area of LA. And this one has really grabbed the headlines because of the technique that was used during the raid. So Border Patrol rent a Penske truck. Penske is a truck rental company that do big cargo removals. And they effectively use this truck as a Trojan horse to lure workers towards them. So the driver of this truck pulls up to a Home Depot, which is like a DIY store, where often sort of undocumented or suspected undocumented migrant workers go to try and get work ad hoc. So the driver pulls up, he says he's looking for workers. And then when these suspected undocumented migrants surround the truck, multiple border agents quite literally spring out of the back of the truck and start arresting people. It is the most, remarkable, controversial of techniques.
It really is extraordinary, and it comes at a time when Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, is trying to turbocharge the recruitment of ICE agents in an attempt to meet the president's very ambitious mass deportation target. They're offering to write off student loans for ICE agent recruits. That would be very appealing for those with a lot of debt. And they're also removing age limits on who can apply to become an immigration enforcement officer.
We've removed any of the age barriers. We no longer have a cap on how old you can be, or you can continue at age 18, sign up for ICE and join us and be a part of it. We'll get you trained and ready to be equipped to go out on the streets and help protect families.
So that's anyone over the age of 18. But here's a story for anyone who is well over the age of 18. I don't know if you've seen this, Martha, but Dean Kane, who played Superman in the mid-90s, has used the age limit changes to sign up to become an ICE agent. He's 59, which would have been too old under the old rules. The old age limit was 40. Ironic, isn't it? Superman, one of America's most famous undocumented immigrants.
Yeah, I'm guessing that Dean Kane's not got much work on at the moment, not much acting work anyway. But yeah, I mean, they're willing to do anything to try and boost these numbers because, they need agents to carry out all the extra work that they're doing on the streets at the moment.
And I noticed one person online replied to him, "Worst Superman ever." That's all for now. The team will be back on Tuesday. Email us on trump100@sky.uk if you want to get in touch.
Thank you for listening and have a lovely weekend. We'll see you next week.